Something unprecedented is happening in the UK property market right now, and it's creating one of the most bizarre contradictions you'll ever see. Small landlords are racing to sell their properties in record numbers. Yet, at the exact same time, billion-pound institutions are aggressively buying up residential homes across Britain. Walk into a property auction today, and you'll witness buyers gazumping each other. Bidding wars erupting over every listing, prices climbing beyond asking. Yet turn on the news and you'll hear nothing but doom and gloom about landlords exiting the market in droves. So what's really going on? Is the landlord era ending, or is this the beginning of the biggest property consolidation Britain has ever seen? The answer is more shocking than you might think, and it all comes down to one thing. The autumn budget has fundamentally changed who gets to be a landlord in this country. If you want to stay ahead of the latest UK property and housing news that actually affects your financial future, hit that like button and subscribe right now. We bring you the facts the mainstream media won't tell you, breaking down exactly what's happening in Britain's property market every single week. The numbers tell a story that nobody wants to hear. According to the National Residential Landlords Association's latest quarterly survey, 26% of landlords sold at least some of their rental properties in 2024. That's more than 1 in 4 landlords choosing to exit the market. Just 4 years ago, that number was 22%. Even more concerning, 31% of landlords are currently planning to sell properties over the next 2 years, including 16% who plan to sell everything and leave the sector entirely. The government's own English private landlord survey confirmed this trend, revealing that landlords in 2024 were significantly more likely to decrease their portfolio size than in any previous year. When asked about reletting vacant properties, only 61% said they would put the property back on the rental market, down from 75% in 2018. The exodus is real, it's accelerating, and it's about to get much worse. But here's where things get strange. While individual landlords scramble for the exits, institutional investors are flooding into the market like never before. Blackstone, the world's largest real estate investor, now manages 17,000 UK residential properties after investing £1.4 billion since late 2023. Pension giant Aviva has pumped £600 million into single-family rental homes since 2020, and they're planning to triple that investment within the next few years. According to property consultant Savills, institutional investment in UK single-family homes hit a record £1.5 billion in late 2023, more than triple the combined total for 2021 and 2022. In the first 3 quarters of 2024 alone, these big players acquired nearly 5,000 properties, marking a 20% increase from the previous year. Legal & General, M&G, Royal London Asset Management and major pension funds are all racing to expand their residential property holdings by hundreds of millions of pounds. The build-to-rent sector just surpassed £5 billion in institutional investment for 2024, marking the 5th consecutive year of record-breaking growth. So while mum-and-pop landlords are being squeezed out, corporate giants are building rental empires. The autumn budget, delivered on October 30th, fundamentally rewrote the rules of property investment in Britain, and it targeted individual landlords with surgical precision. Chancellor Rachel Reeves announced that stamp duty's higher rate for additional properties would jump from 3% to 5%, effective immediately. Think about what that means in practice. A landlord purchasing a £200,000 property now pays £10,000 in stamp duty, a £4,000 increase overnight. On a £300,000 property, that's £15,000 in tax before you even own the property. For context, if you're putting down a 25% deposit on that £300,000 home, your deposit is £75,000 and stamp duty alone adds another £15,000 on top. That's a 20% increase in your upfront capital requirement just to buy one property. But it gets worse. Capital gains tax rates also increased from 10% to 18% for basic rate taxpayers and from 20% to 24% for higher rate taxpayers on the sale of investment properties. Every property sale just became significantly more expensive, trapping landlords who might want to exit. The government estimates this stamp duty increase will generate 130,000 additional transactions for first-time buyers over 5 years, essentially admitting they're deliberately pricing landlords out of the market. What makes this particularly devastating is how these taxes stack on top of existing burdens that have been crushing landlords for years. Section 24, introduced back in 2017 by the Conservative government, fundamentally changed how rental income is taxed. Previously, landlords could deduct their mortgage interest payments as a legitimate business expense, just like every other business in Britain. Section 24 ended that. Now landlords pay tax on their full rental income, not their profit. A landlord earning £30,000 in rent but paying £25,000 in mortgage interest still gets taxed on the full £30,000, even though they only profited £5,000. This alone pushed thousands of landlords into higher tax brackets overnight. Then there's the existing stamp duty burden. Even before the recent increase, landlords were already paying 3% more stamp duty than regular home buyers. Combined with the baseline stamp duty rates, this created a significant barrier to portfolio growth. But nobody in government seems to care that legitimate business expenses are being ignored, that rental income is being taxed as if it's pure profit. The rules of fair taxation simply don't apply to individual landlords anymore. Now, here's where it gets interesting, and this is the part the government doesn't want you to understand. Section 24 tax doesn't apply to limited companies. That stamp duty surcharge doesn't hit institutional investors the same way. Capital gains tax on companies. Different structure, different rates, different rules. The tax code has essentially created two separate property markets, one for individuals and one for corporations, and the corporate track is far more favourable. A recent report showed that 46,000 buy-to-let limited companies were established between January and September 2024. A 23% increase from the previous year. That's more company formations in 9 months than during the entire year of 2021. Landlords are desperately trying to incorporate to escape the individual tax burden, but the cost and complexity of transferring properties into limited companies creates its own barriers. Capital gains tax hits you when you transfer properties into a company structure. Legal fees stack up. Mortgage products for limited companies often carry higher interest rates. For small landlords with 1 or 2 properties, incorporation might not even be worth it. Meanwhile, massive institutional investors like Blackstone, Aviva, and Legal & General were already operating as companies. They never paid Section 24 taxes. They're not hit as hard by stamp duty increases. Their structure was optimized for tax efficiency from day one. The game was rigged before it even started. The consequences of this exodus are already devastating for renters. Zoopla reported that rental supply remains 24% below pre-pandemic levels, while demand for rental properties sits 31% higher than before COVID. Just 256,000 rental homes were available by the end of 2024, a drop of 50,000 properties, or 16.5% in a single year. With supply plummeting and demand surging, rents have exploded. The average UK rent hit £1,872 per month, £70 more than 2023 and £520 higher than late 2019. That's a 38% increase in monthly rent in just 5 years. But the truly alarming statistic is this. According to Oxford Economics, only 1 in 8 renters can now afford to purchase a home in the area where they currently live. Think about that. 87.5% of renters are effectively trapped in the rental market with no realistic path to home ownership. And as landlord numbers shrink, those trapped renters face less choice, higher rents, and more competition for every property that becomes available. The NRLA reports that 7,100 households became homeless in a single quarter of 2024, specifically because their landlord sold the property. The policy intended to help renters by discouraging landlords is instead creating a humanitarian crisis. Yet, despite this obvious supply crisis, institutional investors see nothing but opportunity. They understand something crucial that individual landlords don't have the luxury of appreciating. Rental demand in Britain isn't going anywhere. The average age of a first-time buyer in the UK is now 34, up from 26 in 1997. An entire generation has been locked out of home ownership, forced into long-term renting not by choice, but by economic necessity. House prices have risen far faster than wages for decades, and with mortgage rates still elevated, that gap isn't closing. This creates a captive rental market that will persist for decades. Pension funds and private equity firms don't just see properties, they see 40-year income streams backed by desperate demand and shrinking supply. They're buying properties from desperate individual landlords at discounts of 15 to 20%, acquiring thousands of homes directly from struggling house builders who can't sell to owner-occupiers. They're partnering with developers to purchase entire developments before they're even built. And unlike small landlords who might sell when tax policy changes, these institutional players have the capital, structure, and long-term outlook to weather any storm. They're not worried about Section 24 or stamp duty surcharges because they were never meaningfully exposed to those taxes in the first place. The consolidation trend playing out in Britain mirrors patterns we've already seen in other countries, and the results should terrify anyone who cares about housing affordability or home ownership rates. In the United States, institutional investors now own a significant portion of single-family rental homes in many markets. In Germany, about 15% of rental housing stock is owned by institutions, compared to just over 2% in the UK currently. But that number is rising fast. Industry analysts predict UK institutional ownership could reach 8 to 10% within the next decade if current trends continue. And once institutional investors dominate a market, the entire structure changes. Professional landlords with massive portfolios can set rental rates based on sophisticated market analysis and revenue optimization algorithms, not based on covering mortgage payments and making a modest profit. They have legal teams, property management divisions, and lobbying power that individual landlords could never match. The relationship between landlord and tenant becomes purely corporate, transactional, and optimized for maximum return. The National Residential Landlords Association warns that this shift could permanently alter the character of the UK rental sector, transforming it from a market of individual property owners providing housing to one dominated by corporate landlords treating homes as financial assets. So what happens next? If current trends continue, Britain's rental market will look radically different within 5 years. Small landlords, battered by taxation and regulation, will continue exiting the sector. The government's own survey data suggests this trend is accelerating, not slowing down. Rental supply will continue shrinking as properties get sold to owner-occupiers or institutional investors, and very few new individual landlords will enter a market with such poor economics. Rents will keep rising because supply and demand fundamentals overwhelmingly favour landlords. The remaining institutional landlords will have pricing power that individual landlords never possessed. Renters will face a future where almost all rental housing comes from corporate landlords operating at scale, with standardised processes, aggressive rent collection, and optimisation focused solely on shareholder returns rather than tenant relationships. The pathway to home ownership, already nearly impossible for most renters, could become entirely closed off as housing costs continue outpacing wage growth. And younger generations will spend their entire adult lives renting, building no equity, creating no wealth, permanently locked out of the property market that previous generations used to build financial security. The most bitter irony in all of this is that policies supposedly designed to help renters and increase home ownership are achieving the exact opposite result. Every tax increase on landlords, every regulatory burden, every additional compliance requirement was justified as necessary to protect tenants and cool the housing market. But when you make it financially unviable for individuals to provide rental housing, you don't eliminate the need for rental housing. You just consolidate ownership in the hands of those wealthy enough and structured efficiently enough to survive the tax burden. The Conservative government introduced Section 24, and Labour just increased stamp duty and capital gains tax, but both parties implemented policies that benefit institutional investors at the expense of individual landlords and ultimately renters themselves. The big corporate players lobbying government have far more influence than scattered individual landlords ever could. And now, Britain is sleepwalking into a future where residential property ownership becomes the exclusive domain of pension funds, private equity firms, and international investors, while ordinary people, whether they're trying to rent or buy, get priced out of housing security entirely. The data is clear, the trend is unmistakable, and the consequences are already unfolding. Small landlords are selling in record numbers. Institutional investors are buying in record volumes. Rents are rising faster than inflation. Supply is shrinking dramatically. Home ownership is becoming impossible for most renters. And government policy is accelerating every single one of these trends. This isn't a housing crisis anymore. This is a systematic restructuring of who gets to own property in Britain. And it's happening right now while most people aren't paying attention. The question isn't whether this transformation will continue. The question is whether anyone will do anything to stop it before the entire rental market becomes corporatized and home ownership becomes a luxury reserved exclusively for those who already have wealth.